Top of the morning. Got something weird going on with my coffee. A little too much cinnamon. That is strong. Today what I want to talk about is retirement. How much money do you need to retire? And I'm going to do this with a series of videos, each with a different example. Today's example is 20-ish, and you save nothing. How much do I need to retire? For these, I will have an aggressive standard portfolio. But before I get into that, quick disclaimer. Remind everybody this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Quick view at the turtles here in Florida, and let's get into it. Today we're going to do an example. The process is going to be to estimate your budget. We're going to look up some data on a table. We're going to do some back-of-the-napkin calculations and come up with some interesting numbers. We're going to use the Better Benchmark portfolio for this calculation. This is a 40-40-20 NASDAQ 100, S&P 500, and a bond fund. Now, it's important to understand the assumptions here. This is a rough approximation. It's fine if you're under 45. You get over that, you got to do a little more work on your budget. For this, we're going to assume the historical stock market is similar to the future stock market. We're going to assume inflation is at 2.5%. You're going to retire at 65. Your retirement withdrawal rate is 4.5%. You're going to take some Social Security. We're doing this calculation based upon a pre-tax $100,000 cost of living. If the cost of living today, where you'd like to retire, is more than $100,000 pre-tax, let's say it's $200,000 or $300,000, then either double it or triple it to get to that number. The budget is the single hardest thing you can do. So it's so hard, we're not going to do it. We're just going to estimate it. We're going to do a back-of-the-napkin calculation to do the budget. So I want you to jot down your total income last year, jot down the total amount you saved, subtract the two. This is your budget. For this example, we're going to assume you make $75,000, you save nothing, and then for the calcs, just to be a little conservative, we'll run it through at $100,000. And then we do the calcs based on pre-tax numbers, but you can also do this as post-tax numbers and just assume you're saving entirely in a Roth. So the first thing I want to introduce is the table. At the top of the table are the assumptions, and the numbers that are interesting to you is the closest number to your age, and then the number in a decade, 10 years from now. In this case, if we read this table, assuming you're 25, I know you're 20, but assuming you're roughly 25, you should have saved around $21,000 so far for retirement. Now, this is an average savings, and at this number, you need to keep saving. If you have saved $74,000, you are 90% certain that you have saved enough to retire. In a decade, you need to have saved $200,000 to have a 90% assurance that you've saved enough for retirement. First, the back-of-the-napkin calculation. The formula is figure out how much you need, that 90% in 10 years, divide that number by 10, because that's an annual number, how much you need to save per year, and divide that number by 2. Half of it's how much you need to save, and half of it's how much interest you need to be getting. For this example, in a decade, I need $200,000. So divide that by 10, you get $20K. Half of that is $10K. So you need to be saving about $10K, or roughly $830 a month in your IRA. Now, this is roughly 13% of your income. You need twice as much to retire on what is $200,000 pre-tax today. Now, what if I don't make it? In 10 years, I'm 35. What if I have less? That only means you need 5. At age 35, if I have less than $63,000, you need to be saving a lot more. If at age 35 you have exactly $63,000, you are on target. You need to keep recalculating this number and keep saving at roughly the rate you're saving it now. And if you're age 35 and you've saved all the way up to $200,000, congratulations, you've made it. However, you need to keep this invested in an aggressive portfolio and also keep taking advantage of the company matches. So if your 401k matches 3%, put in at least 3% or 6% to get the match. The portfolio matters. These calculations are based on this S&P 500 NASDAQ portfolio. If you invest more conservatively, you will have to save more. Also, many of the 401ks do not offer a NASDAQ option. If that is the case, then invest in the S&P 500 or the whole market portfolio that your 401k will invest in, and then invest in the NASDAQ in your IRA or Roth. That'll make your overall portfolio look more like what it needs to look like. Now, there is an exit risk that everyone should be aware of as they're saving, and that is that right before you retire, the stock market goes way down, you don't have enough to retire. So you need to keep that in mind, and 5 years before you stop working, you need to convert that from this 80-20 to a 60-40 portfolio, or even more conservative. So please go take a look at the other videos. There are other examples, and there's lots of videos on portfolio management. With that, a quick summary. You need to roughly understand your current budget. This is the hardest thing to do. Depending on your age, look at the numbers, do the quick math, make sure you're saving enough, and target those 90% certainty numbers. And then recheck this every couple years to make sure you're on track. And just as a reminder, in this one, the short answer was save 13% of your income, and you should be in good shape. With that, another view of the turtles. I will sign off with a reminder. If you have any questions, subscribe, add a comment with a question. I will get back to you on those. And then wishing everybody top of the morning. Achoo!